Millionaire finds child. Tied to a tree for 5 years until something surprising happens. The black Mercedes-Benz cut through the dirt road with surgical precision, kicking up a cloud of dust that contrasted with the clear sky on that October morning. Inside the vehicle, William Thompson obsessively adjusted the air conditioning, as if he could control not only the temperature, but also the discomfort growing in his chest as he approached Willow Creek. At 45, William had built an empire. His name was synonymous with success in the financial market, and his reputation as a ruthless negotiator preceded him in any boardroom. The custom Italian suit and Swiss watch on his wrist were just the surface of a fortune built with iron determination and, as many whispered, a complete lack of scruples. "How much longer?" he asked the driver, checking his watch for the third. "Time in the last 5 minutes." "About 20 minutes, sir," the man replied, keeping his eyes fixed on the road. William closed his eyes for a moment, trying to push away the memories that were beginning to surface. Willow Creek. 30 years had passed since he left that place, swearing never to return. Now, ironically, he was there because of his mother, or rather, because of what she had left behind after her passing. A useless piece of land in the middle of nowhere, he murmured to himself, opening his leather briefcase and pulling out the documents his lawyer had prepared. The property, a family inheritance for generations, was the last tie he had to that place. His intention was clear: sell it as quickly as possible and return to his life in Chicago. The car began to slow as it entered the town limits. William looked out the window at the subtle changes 3 decades had brought. The simple houses now shared space with a few more modern buildings, but the essence of the place remained the same: a small town where everyone knew each other and consequently knew each other's stories. His phone vibrated. Another message from his assistant about an important meeting in 2 days. "I'll be back tomorrow," he typed quickly. "Just need to sign the papers and take care of some formalities." The car stopped in front of the town's only hotel, a modest establishment that paled in comparison to the places he usually stayed. William stepped out of the vehicle, adjusting his suit and ignoring the curious glances of the passing locals. "Mr. Thompson?" a familiar voice called out to him. Turning around, he found John Peterson, the former caretaker of his family's estate. The man had aged considerably, but his eyes still held that characteristic gleam of someone who knew more than they let on. "John Peterson," William replied with a brief formal nod. "I assume you received the notice from my office about the sale." The caretaker nodded slowly, a gesture that seemed to carry the weight of decades. "Yes, sir, but—" He hesitated, glancing around as if searching for the right words. "There's something you need to see before making any decisions," William sighed, annoyed. "Look, John, I don't have time for—" "It's about the property," the caretaker interrupted, something rare in his always respectful demeanor. "Something happened, something you need to see with your own eyes." There was an urgency in the man's voice that made William pause. In 3 decades of business, he had learned to recognize when something was out of the ordinary. The expression on the caretaker's face suggested this wasn't a matter that could be resolved with a simple signature. "All right," he finally conceded, "but it has to be now. The sooner we settle this, the better." John nodded, a flicker of relief crossing his wrinkled face. "I'll get the truck. The path there isn't the same as you remember." While he waited, William looked around at the village once more. The bell of the old church still rang, marking the hours as it always had. For a moment he felt like the boy who used to run through those streets before life had taught him that feelings were luxuries he couldn't afford. Little did he know that in a matter of hours, all the certainties he had built over his life would begin to crumble, one by one, like a house of cards hit by the first breeze of autumn. John Peterson's pickup truck wound its way along the muddy path leading to the old Thompson estate. William gazed out the window at the ancient trees that seemed to bend over the road, forming a natural tunnel that filtered the sunlight into dancing patterns on the hood of the vehicle. "The woods have grown a lot over the years," John remarked, breaking the tense silence that had settled since they left the village. "Sometimes I think they have a life of their own, you know, as if they decided for themselves where and how to grow." William stifled a sarcastic comment. He had forgotten how the people from that place had a tendency toward mysticism, turning natural phenomena into something supernatural. It was exactly the kind of mindset he had fled when he left for the city. The estate came into view ahead of them, an old two-story house with a circular porch that wrapped all the way around it. William felt an involuntary tightness in his chest as he saw the place where he had grown up. The walls, once a pristine white, now bore the marks of time and vines that climbed all the way to the roof. "I had the house cleaned last week," John said as he parked. "But the woods are different now." "Different how?" William asked, stepping out of the vehicle and adjusting his suit, now slightly wrinkled from the trip. The caretaker didn't answer immediately. Instead, he began walking toward a side trail that William didn't remember existing. "It's better if you see for yourself." They walked for a few minutes among the trees, the ground covered in dry leaves that crackled under their feet. William noticed that as they advanced, the air seemed to grow denser, as if they were entering another world. The sounds of nature, birds, insects, the wind in the leaves, gradually faded into an almost absolute silence. That was when he saw her. In the center of a small clearing stood a tree unlike the others. Its trunk was thicker, its bark darker, and its branches stretched out peculiarly, almost like twisted arms reaching for the sky. But it wasn't the tree itself that made William stop abruptly. It was the girl. She was sitting at the base of the trunk, wearing a simple white cotton dress that looked strangely clean for someone who was outdoors. Her long black hair framed a serene face, and her eyes seemed to hold a wisdom impossible for someone so young. "Hello, Uncle William," she said, her clear and calm voice cutting through the silence like a bell. William felt his blood run cold. How did she know his name, and why was she there alone in the middle of the woods? "John Peterson, what kind of joke is this?" He turned to the caretaker, but the man only shook his head sadly. "She's been here for 5 years," John Peterson replied. "No one can get her to leave. It's like the tree won't let her." "That's ridiculous." William stepped toward the girl, determined to put an end to this absurd story. "Come on, little one, I'll take you." But something strange happened as he tried to approach. The closer he got, the heavier his legs felt, as if he were walking against an invisible current. 3 steps away from the girl, he simply couldn't move any further. "The tree won't allow it," the girl explained calmly, as if she were commenting on the weather. "It knows it's not yet time." "Time for what?" William asked, his voice betraying a mix of frustration and disbelief. "Time to break the cycle," she replied, her eyes fixed on his. "You know what I'm talking about, don't you? The memories you tried to bury, they're still here, growing like roots in the dark." William took a step back, feeling suddenly vulnerable. There was something in the child's gaze that seemed to pierce through all the layers of protection he had built over the years. "Who are you?" he finally asked, his voice little more than a whisper. The girl smiled, a sad smile that didn't belong to a child her age. "My name is Claire, and I am a part of this tree just as much as it is a part of me. But the real question, Uncle William, isn't who I am. It's who you've become since you ran away from here." A sudden wind blew through the clearing, making the leaves dance around them. William felt a shiver run down his spine as he noticed for a moment that the shadows of the tree branches seemed to form patterns in the dry leaves, patterns that resembled words in a language he couldn't read. John Peterson placed a hand on his shoulder. "Now, do you understand why you needed to see this before selling the property?" William didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the girl, on Claire, who continued to sit calmly as if this surreal situation were the most natural thing in the world. For the first time in decades, William Thompson, the ruthless businessman who had built an empire, on cold, calculated decisions, felt completely lost. The hotel room felt suffocating that night, despite the air conditioning running at full blast. William loosened his tie and poured himself another finger of whiskey as he spread out various old documents on the bed that John Peterson had handed him hours earlier. "These are the records your mother kept," the caretaker had explained. "She never let anyone touch them, but now, well, now I think you need to see them." Yellowed newspaper clippings, old photographs, and handwritten letters formed a mosaic of memories William had worked so hard to forget. His fingers trembled slightly. As he picked up a specific photograph, A young girl of about 16 smiled at the camera, her long black hair swaying in the wind. "Eleanor," he murmured, feeling the weight of his sister's name on his tongue for the first time in decades. Beside the photo was a newspaper clipping dated 15 years ago. The headline was discreet, just a few lines on an inside page. "Young girl goes missing after storm in Willow Creek." William vaguely remembered hearing the news in Chicago, but at the time he had been too busy with a multi-million-dollar merger to pay attention. His phone buzzed. Another urgent message from the office. He ignored it. For the first time in years, something more important than business occupied his thoughts. The words of the girl in the clearing echoed in his mind. "The memories you tried to bury, they're still here." A yellowed envelope caught his eye. Inside he found a series of letters written by Eleanor. Most were addressed to their mother, all sent from different places across the country. The last letter, however, made him freeze. It was addressed to him. "Dear William, if you're reading this, it means Mom finally decided it was time. There's so much I need to tell you, so much you need to understand. About that night, about why I ran away, about the true nature of our family and that tree in the woods. Do you remember the stories Grandma used to tell? About how our family had a special gift, a connection to that ancient tree? Back then, we laughed and said they were just tales to put us to sleep. But there was truth in those stories, William, a truth that my daughter will now have to carry." The letter ended abruptly there. William jumped to his feet, his heart pounding in his chest. A daughter. Eleanor had a daughter. A knock at the door startled him. It was John Peterson again. "Sorry to bother you so late, Mr. William, but Mrs. Carmen, the old teacher from the village, heard you were here. She said she has something important to tell you about your sister." William grabbed his coat without hesitation. As they walked down the main street of the village, now quiet and shrouded in shadows, his certainties began to unravel. The girl in the tree, Claire, could it be possible that she was... Mrs. Carmen's house was an old building in the higher part of the village. The white-haired woman waited for them on the porch, her gnarled hands holding a carved wooden box. "I knew you'd come back one day, William," she said, her voice heavy with the weight of years. "Eleanor made me promise to keep this until the right time." Inside the box was a diary and a more recent photograph. William felt the air leave his lungs as he saw the image. It was Eleanor, older, holding a newborn baby in her arms. On the back of the photo, a single handwritten line, "Claire, my light in the darkness." "Your sister showed up here about 6 years ago," began Mrs. Carmen, her eyes lost in memories. "She was different, scared. She said she needed to protect her daughter, that they had found her. She spent a few weeks hiding in my house, but then..." The woman hesitated, looking meaningfully at John Peterson, who nodded, encouraging her to continue. "Then, on a stormy night, she took little Claire to her family's estate. It was the last time I saw her. The next day, only the girl was found sitting by that tree, just as it stands to this day." William flipped through the journal with trembling hands. The last pages contained frantic notes about a family curse, secrets that needed to be protected, and repeated mentions of a cycle that needed to be broken. "Why didn't anyone come looking for me?" he asked, his voice hoarse with restrained emotion. "Eleanor made us promise," replied John Peterson. "She said you could only know when you were ready to face the truth. When he returns," were her exact words, "it will be because the time has come." William looked out the window toward the woods stretching into the distance. Even from that far away, he could swear he felt something, a presence, a connection. He couldn't explain. Somewhere among those trees his niece waited, bound to a mystery he was only beginning to understand. "There's one more thing you need to know," added Mrs. Carmen, her voice dropping to almost a whisper. "On the last night she was here, Eleanor said something I've never forgotten. The tree chooses its guardians, and this time it chose my Claire. Only when the last guardian accepts their mistakes can the cycle be broken." William felt a shiver run down his spine. Suddenly, Claire's words made a terrible kind of sense. The tree won't let go. It knows it's not time yet. The news of William Thompson's presence in Willow Creek spread like wildfire. The next morning, Rose's Cafe, the only establishment of its kind in the central square, buzzed with whispers and furtive glances as he walked in for breakfast. "I thought you would have left by now," remarked Rose, the owner, a robust woman, with rosy cheeks who had known him since he was a boy. There was a note of disapproval in her voice that didn't go unnoticed. "There were complications," William replied curtly, glancing once more at Eleanor's diary, which he hadn't let go of since the night before. One of the pages caught his attention. It was an account about their grandmother, Matilda, whom William barely remembered. Eleanor had written about how the old woman used to spend hours talking to the ancient tree, as if it were an old friend. "Grandma used to say our family had an agreement with it," the text read, "that we were its guardians, chosen to protect not just the tree but the secrets it held. Every generation has its role," she would repeat, "and every choice comes with a price. You shouldn't meddle with certain things," Rose's voice interrupted his reading. She had approached quietly, refilling his coffee cup. "Some stories are better left buried." Before William could respond, the cafe door swung open violently. A tall man with broad shoulders and graying hair entered, followed by two others. William recognized him immediately: Albert Johnson, his former business partner, who had lost everything in a corporate maneuver William had executed 5 years ago. "So the rumors are true," Albert thundered, his voice echoing through the now silent cafe. "The great William Thompson has returned to his little hometown. How touching." William kept his expression neutral. Years of tough negotiations had trained him well. "Albert, I didn't know you had moved here. A lot has changed since you destroyed my company," replied Albert, pulling up a chair and sitting down uninvited, "including me. You know, I found something very interesting to do with my time, studying the history of this town, especially the history of your family." A heavy silence fell over the cafe. William noticed that several customers began to discreetly leave. "Have you heard about the Thompson curse?" continued Albert, a cruel smile playing on his lips. "It's fascinating how with every generation, something terrible happens to that family. Your grandmother isolated until the end of her life. Your father consumed by drink. Your sister, well, we all know what happened to Eleanor." William slammed the journal shut, his fingers white from gripping the cover. "Watch what you say, Albert." "Or what?" challenged his former partner. "You'll sue me?" "This isn't Chicago, William. Here, people still remember. They remember how you left, abandoning your sister. They remember the screams that came from your house at night, and now, with that strange girl tied to the tree." "What are you talking about?" William interrupted, his heart racing. "Ah, so you've seen her? The little witch your sister left behind? You know, the people in the village have some interesting theories about her. Some say she's a vengeful spirit. Others, that she's a demon trapped by your grandmother. But me? I think she's the living proof of the Thompson sins." Rose approached, her hands trembling slightly as she held the tray. "Please, gentlemen, not here." But Albert wasn't finished. "You may have built an empire out there, William, but here you're just another Thompson, and this village hasn't forgotten what your family did." William stood up slowly, his face a mask of calm that didn't reflect the storm inside. "You don't know anything, Albert." "Don't I?" Albert laughed, a humorless sound. "Then why is your niece tied to that tree? Why can't anyone free her? And why, since she appeared, have strange things started happening in the village?" At that moment, a strong wind blew through the cafe windows, making the glasses clink and papers fly. Outside, dark clouds began to form in the sky, despite the day having dawned clear. "See?" Albert pointed toward the window. "The curse is alive, William, and you brought it back by returning here." William left the cafe without responding, but Albert's words followed him like shadows. As he walked through the square, he noticed how the townspeople stepped aside as he passed, some making subtle signs of the cross. His phone rang. It was his lawyer in Chicago, probably asking about the sale of the property. William ignored the call. For the first time in his life, business would have to wait. There was something more urgent to resolve. On the horizon, above the woods surrounding the Thompson estate, the dark clouds seemed to gather, as if nature itself were responding to the tension beginning to take hold of the town. And somewhere among the trees, Claire waited, an unwilling guardian of secrets that now threatened to come to light. The basement of the old Thompson house smelled of mold and forgotten memories. William moved the flashlight methodically, illuminating dusty boxes and furniture covered in yellowed sheets. John Peterson followed silently, carrying an old oil lamp as backup. The storm brewing outside threatened to cut the power at any moment. "Your grandmother used to spend hours down here," the caretaker commented, his voice echoing off the stone walls, "especially in her later years. She said she was organizing the family's history." William stopped in front of a particular shelf, his eyes fixed on a series of leather-bound notebooks, each marked with different symbols. As he picked one up, he noticed that the symbols were similar to the marks that occasionally appeared on the trunk of the tree where Claire stood. "These are journals," John explained. "All the Guardians kept one. Your grandmother was obsessed with preserving them." William Thompson's hands trembled slightly as he opened the first notebook. The handwriting was old, dated 1897, belonging to his great-grandmother, Antonia Thompson. The first pages contained seemingly ordinary accounts of the family's daily life, but soon the tone changed drastically. "The tree has chosen again. This time, my little Matilda. I fear what this means. Each guardian pays a different price for the gift. Some lose their sanity, others lose those they love. What will be demanded of my daughter?" A loud thunderclap shook the house, making William jump. John Peterson's oil lamp flickered, casting dancing shadows on the walls. "Keep reading," urged the caretaker. "Your grandmother used to say the truth was in these notebooks." William skipped a few pages, landing on a passage underlined several times. "The pact is older than our family. The tree was here long before, guarding secrets we were never meant to know. Our ancestors made an agreement. We would be its guardians, protecting it from those who sought to destroy it, and in return it would grant us its gift. But every gift comes with a price, and each generation must pay its due." "What kind of gift?" William murmured, more to himself than to John Peterson. As if answering his question, another thunderclap roared and the power finally gave out. In the sudden darkness, illuminated only by the oil lamp, William noticed something strange. Marks on the wall that had not been visible before began to glow faintly, the same symbols from the diaries and the tree. "Your grandmother painted them with a special ink," explained John Peterson, bringing the lamp closer. "She said they were messages from the tree." William approached the marks, his fingers tracing the luminescent symbols. Suddenly a long-buried memory surfaced. Him as a child watching his grandmother make the same gesture, her hands glowing with a soft light as she touched the tree in the grove. "The gift," he whispered, finally understanding. "It was the ability to see the truth," John Peterson completed, "to see beyond the veil that separates our world from the world of secrets. Your grandmother could see the past in the trees, your sister could see the future, and Claire can see both," concluded William, remembering the girl's disturbingly wise gaze. Continuing to read the diaries, William discovered that each guardian manifested the gift differently. Some could heal through touch, others could influence the growth of plants, but all paid a price: isolation, loss, suffering. In one of the last diaries, he found his grandmother's shaky handwriting. The cycle must be broken. Eleanor understood this before any of us. That's why she fled. But one cannot escape destiny, only transform it. The last guardian will have to make a choice: accept the gift with all its consequences or break the pact forever. But the price of freedom will be the highest of all. A noise from upstairs made both men turn. Heavy footsteps echoed across the old floorboards. "There's someone in the house," whispered John Peterson, raising the lantern. Climbing the basement stairs cautiously, William heard raised voices. He recognized Albert Johnson's among them. "It's here somewhere," his former partner was saying. "The original deeds to the property. If we find them, we can prove that the Thompsons were never the true owners of this land." William felt a growing anger. Albert wasn't just trying to get revenge. He was trying to unearth secrets that were meant to stay buried. At that moment, another thunderclap shook the house, and through the window, William saw something that made his blood run cold. In the woods, the tree where Claire was standing seemed to emit its own light, pulsating like a heartbeat amidst the storm. "It's time," said John Peterson, his face shadowed by the light of the lantern. "The tree is calling. And this time, Mr. Thompson, you'll have to choose. Will you keep running, or will you face your family's legacy?" The words had barely left his lips when a sharp scream cut through the air, coming from the direction of the woods. It was Claire's voice. The rain lashed down mercilessly as William and John ran toward the woods. The lightning illuminated their path in dramatic flashes, revealing twisted branches that seemed to want to block their way. Claire's scream still echoed in their ears, mingling with the sound of the storm. "There!" shouted John, pointing toward the clearing. The scene they found was surreal. Albert Johnson and his men surrounded the tree where Claire was, brandishing axes and ropes. The girl remained seated at the base of the trunk, but her normally serene face now showed signs of distress. "Step away from her," William's voice thundered, surprising even himself with its authority. Albert turned, his face twisted into a mask of fury and determination. "Too late, Thompson. We found the original deeds in the courthouse of the neighboring town. These lands never rightfully belonged to your family. They were stolen from my ancestors over 100 years ago." "What are you talking about?" "The Johnsons were the true owners of this land," Albert shouted, "until your great-great-grandmother used some kind of witchcraft to drive my family away. But this ends today." One of his men stepped forward with an axe, but something extraordinary happened. As the blade touched the tree trunk, it simply shattered, as if it had struck pure diamond. "The tree protects itself," said Claire, her voice strangely amplified by the storm, "just as it has protected the secrets of all the families of Willow Creek for generations." William felt a strange energy course through his body. The marks on the tree began to glow, just as the symbols in the basement had, but now, inexplicably, he could read them. "It wasn't just the Thompsons," he murmured, the revelations flooding his mind like flashes of memory. "All the old families in the village had their secrets kept here. The tree was a guardian for everyone." "Lies," shouted Albert, but his voice trembled. "The feud between our families was never about land," William continued, the words flowing, as if dictated by the tree itself. "It was about the right to guard the secrets. Your family wanted to use the tree's power for personal gain. Mine swore to protect it, even if it meant bearing a curse." Claire nodded slowly. "You're beginning to understand, Uncle William. Every family in the village has its story buried in the roots of this tree. Some glorious, others shameful. The Thompsons didn't steal this land. They were chosen to be the guardians of all these stories." A strong wind blew through the clearing, and William saw images forming in the shadows. Of the leaves, his grandmother, still young, healing sick children with a touch. His sister Eleanor as a teenager, foreseeing and preventing tragedies. His father consumed by the responsibility of guarding secrets he could never reveal. "The price of the gift," whispered John Peterson. "Each guardian carries the burden of knowing truths that cannot be spoken." Albert staggered back, his certainties crumbling. "No, this can't be true. My father told me." "Your father told the story he could bear," Claire interrupted gently, "just as his father did before him. But the tree holds the full truth. Do you want to see it?" Before anyone could react, one of the tree's branches moved, touching Albert's forehead. The man froze, his eyes widening as visions of the past flooded his mind. "No!" he shouted, falling to his knees. "Father, why did you never tell me?" William watched, stunned, as the other men stepped back, frightened by the power they had witnessed. The rain began to ease, but the air was still charged with electricity. "Now do you understand why I'm here?" Claire asked, her eyes fixed on William. "The tree needed all of you to see the truth. The cycle of secrets and lies must end." "But what is the cost of this truth?" William asked, remembering the warning in his grandmother's diary. Claire smiled sadly. "The price is accepting who we truly are. All our choices, all our mistakes. Are you ready for that, Uncle William?" The question hung in the air like the mist beginning to form around them. William looked at Albert, still kneeling, processing the truths he had uncovered. He looked at John Peterson, the silent guardian of so many secrets. And finally, he looked at the tree, understanding for the first time the true weight of his family's legacy. "What do I need to do?" he asked, his voice barely more than a whisper. "First," replied Claire, You need to do something you've never done in your entire life. You need to forgive yourself. At that moment, the clouds parted slightly, allowing a single ray of sunlight to break through the clearing, illuminating the marks on the tree that now formed a pattern William recognized. It was the same one his sister Eleanor used to draw when they were children, a symbol of protection and renewal. The twilight painted the sky in shades of orange as William returned to the old Thompson house, carrying with him the last journal of Eleanor that Mrs. Carman had given him. Albert and his men had left in silence, each carrying the weight of newly discovered truths. In the living room, now lit by candles due to the power outage, William sat in the old leather armchair that had belonged to his father. John Peterson had lit the fireplace, and the crackling fire cast dancing shadows on the walls, reminiscent of the mysterious marks on the tree. "Your sister used to sit in that exact chair," the caretaker remarked, serving 2 cups of tea. "In the last weeks before she passed, she would spend hours writing in that journal." With trembling hands, William opened the notebook. Eleanor's handwriting, usually so elegant, showed signs of haste and agitation in the final pages. "The gift is growing stronger. The visions don't stop. Past and future mix like waters from different rivers. I see Claire, my little Claire, and the role she will have to play. I see William, my brother, finally returning to face his demons. And I see the choice you will have to make, the same choice I am making now." William paused his reading, his emotions threatening to overflow. "Why did she never tell me about Claire?" "She tried," John Peterson replied softly. "That last night before you left for Chicago. But you were so determined to leave everything behind." The memory hit William like a punch. Eleanor knocking on his door, begging to talk. He, busy packing, had said he didn't have time, that an important life was waiting for him in the capital. "Later, Eleanor, we'll talk later." There never was a later. He continued reading. "The gift of the Thompsons has always been greater than simply seeing the future or healing illnesses. It was the ability to carry the pain of others, to hold their deepest secrets. Each guardian chose how to use this gift. Some, like Grandma, chose to heal. Others, like Dad, succumbed to the weight of the secrets. I chose to protect Claire, even if it meant losing myself in the process." A sharp sound cut through the silence. It was William's phone, once again ignored. On the screen, dozens of messages from his assistant about urgent business in Chicago. "Some choices define us," said a familiar voice. William looked up. Claire was standing in the doorway, her white dress practically glowing in the dim light. John Peterson didn't seem surprised by her presence. "But how did you get out of the tree?" stammered William. "I didn't leave," replied Claire with an enigmatic smile. "I'm there right now, but I'm also here. The gift allows that when necessary." She moved closer, sitting on the floor near the fireplace. For a moment, William saw Eleanor in her, the same deep gaze, the same serenity in the face of the inexplicable. "Mom knew this day would come," Claire continued. "She saw all the possibilities, all the paths, and she chose the only one that could break the cycle." "What choice was that?" asked William, though something in his heart already knew the answer. "She chose to trust you, Uncle William, even after everything. She knew that one day you would return, not out of obligation or guilt, but because you would finally be ready to understand." William returned to the journal, flipping to the last page. Eleanor's handwriting, now firm and decisive, had written just a few lines. "Dear brother, when you read this, you will have already begun to understand. The true gift of the Thompsons is not in what we can see or do. It is in what we choose to do with that knowledge. Claire is the key, but you are the lock. Only when both of you come together can the portal be opened or closed forever. The choice this time will be yours." "What choice?" asked William, his voice choked. Claire stood up, her eyes reflecting the flames of the fireplace. "The tree doesn't just hold secrets, Uncle William. It holds possibilities, paths not taken, choices not made, even—" She hesitated, looking at him deeply. "Even the path to finding my mother." William's heart stopped for a moment. "Eleanor is—" "Not everything that is lost is dead," Claire replied softly. "Some people just choose to lose themselves until someone finds them. But finding her comes at a price. You'll have to give up everything you've built, All your wealth, all your power, that's what the tree demands, an equivalent exchange. William looked at his phone, at the journal, at the portrait of his family on the wall. His entire life had been built on the principle that success meant power, money, control. Now, for the first time, he wondered if he had misunderstood everything from the start. Dawn found William still in the library of the old house, surrounded by the journals of the previous guardians. His eyes burned from the sleepless night, but his mind was clearer than it had ever been. The yellowed pages told not only the story of his family, but of all the families of Willow Creek, an intricate web of destinies intertwined by the ancestral tree. "You didn't sleep," Claire observed, materializing once again in the library. This time she carried something in her hands, a small notebook with a faded blue cover. "How could I?" replied William, running his hands over his tired face. "Every page I read, every story, it's like I'm seeing our family for the first time." Claire approached, placing the blue notebook on the table. "This was Mom's diary when she was my age. I think it's time for you to read it." William opened the notebook with reverent care. Eleanor's teenage handwriting was round and dreamy, so different from the hurried script of her later entries. The first pages were typical of a 12-year-old girl: dreams, fears, little joys. But then, the tone changed drastically. Today, it happened again. I saw William in the future, a powerful man but so empty. I saw the price he would pay for his choices, and the price we would all pay. The tree showed me two paths, one where he keeps running, building higher and higher, walls around himself, and another where he finds the courage to return and face the truth. "She knew," murmured William. "Even back then, she already knew." "Mom always knew," confirmed Claire. "Her gift was the strongest of all. She didn't just see fragments of the future like the other guardians. She saw all possible futures, all the paths each choice could create." William continued reading, his hands trembling more and more. "The tree showed me today that I will have a daughter, a special girl, who will carry the gift differently from all the other guardians. She will be a bridge, not just between past and future, but between choice and destiny. And William, oh William, you will have to lose everything to find what truly matters." The sound of footsteps in the hallway interrupted the reading. John Peterson entered hurriedly, his face marked by concern. "Mr. Williams, something is happening in the village. Albert has gathered a large group. They're coming here." William stood up, but there was no fear in his eyes, only a quiet determination that even surprised himself. "Let them come," he said. "It's time for all the truths to come to light." Claire smiled, a smile so reminiscent of Eleanor that it made William's heart ache. "You finally understand, don't you?" "Yes," he replied, looking out the library window at the woods where the ancient tree stood tall. "It's not about power or money, it never was. It's about choices, the ones we've made and the ones we can still make." On the table, his phone began to vibrate again. It was his lawyer in Chicago, probably more news about the billion-dollar merger he was about to finalize. Without hesitation, William turned off the device. "What are you going to do?" asked John Peterson. "What I should have done 30 years ago," William replied, picking up Eleanor's blue journal. "I'm going to stop running." At that moment, a strong wind blew through the library, causing the pages of the diaries to flutter. On the wall, the old family photographs seemed to come to life for an instant. Faces of generations of guardians, watching the heir who finally understood his true legacy. "There's one more thing you need to know," said Claire, her voice taking on a graver tone. "About the night Mom disappeared. About the real reason I'm bound to the tree." William sat down again, his heart pounding in his chest. Outside, he could hear voices approaching. The entire village seemed to be heading toward the Thompson estate. The moment of final truth was approaching. "That night," Claire began, her eyes gleaming with ancient wisdom, "Mom made a choice that would change not only our fate, but the fate of all the families in Willow Creek. And now, Uncle William, you'll have to decide whether to finish what she started or let the cycle continue for another generation." The rising sun cast its first rays through the window, illuminating Claire's face in a way that made her seem almost ethereal. In the distance, the ancient tree seemed to pulse with its own energy, as if it too were waiting for the decision that was about to come. The crowd gathered in front of the Thompson house, their voices mingling with the wind that blew ever stronger through the woods. William, Claire, and John Peterson watched from the porch as Albert Johnson led the group, waving old papers in the air. "The time of truth has come, Thompson," shouted Albert. "Everyone needs to know what your family has hidden for generations." William took a step forward, but felt Claire's small hand grip his. "Wait," she said softly. "First you need to know the whole truth. About that night, about Mom, about what the tree truly guards." The girl closed her eyes for a moment, and when she opened them again, they shone with an unnatural golden hue. Her voice, when she spoke, seemed to come from very far away. "That stormy night, Mom had her final vision. She saw all possible futures converging into a single moment. This moment. She saw you returning. She saw Albert discovering the ancient scriptures. She saw the entire village gathering to witness the end of a cycle that began over 200 years ago." William felt a shiver run down his spine. "What else did she see?" "She saw that the tree wasn't just a guardian of secrets," Claire continued. "It was a portal to a place where time works differently, a place where she could wait until the right moment arrived." The words struck William like lightning. "Eleanor is there?" Claire nodded. "The tree protects her, keeping her in a space between times. But she can only return when the cycle is broken, when all the secrets are revealed, and all the wrong choices are corrected." At that moment, Carmen emerged from the crowd, carrying an old wooden box. "William," she called, her voice trembling with emotion, "there's something you need to see." Inside the box was a document unlike the others. It wasn't a deed or an official record, but a handwritten contract dated 1823. The signatures at the end made William's blood run cold. There were the names of all the patriarchs of the ancient families of Willow Creek, including the Thompsons and the Johnsons. "The covenant of the 7 families," William read aloud. "An agreement to protect the portal," Claire finished. "The tree didn't choose our family to keep secrets, Uncle William. It chose all the families in the village. Each had its role, its specific gift. The Thompsons were just the primary guardians, chosen to coordinate all the others." The revelation washed over the crowd like a wave. Old resentments and rivalries began to make sense under a new light. Albert, who had stepped closer to listen, let the papers he was holding fall from his trembling hands. "So, it wasn't about the land?" he asked, his voice small. "No," replied Claire. "The Johnsons were the guardians of memory. Their gift was to preserve the true history, passed down from generation to generation. When your family tried to use that knowledge for personal gain, the gift was suspended, and the memories began to distort." William looked at the crowd, recognizing in the faces before him traces of the ancient families, the Smiths, with their gift of communicating with nature, the Olivers, who could see the truth in people's hearts, the Perrys, who healed through music. "That's why Eleanor had to leave," Claire continued. "She saw that the balance between the families was unraveling. Power and greed were corrupting the gifts. She entered the portal to keep the connection alive until the time came to restore harmony." "And you?" asked William. "Why did you need to be bound to the tree?" "Because I am the last guardian of this generation, the only one born with all the gifts combined. My presence keeps the portal open, waiting for what?" "Waiting for you to make the right choice," replied Claire, a gentle smile on her lips. "Not out of obligation or guilt, but out of love. The true power of the Guardians was never in their supernatural gifts, Uncle William. It was in the ability to choose the greater good over self-interest." The wind picked up, and the clouds in the sky began to form a circular pattern over the property. The ancient tree now glowed with its own light, visible even from a distance. "It's time," said Claire, extending her hand. "Mom is waiting, but to bring her back, you'll have to do more than just give up your fortune. You'll have to accept the gift you rejected so long ago and help restore the balance among all the families." William looked at his hands, the same hands that for years had signed million-dollar contracts and crushed competitors. Now for the first time he could see a soft golden light emanating from them, just like the one he had seen in his grandmother's hands so many years ago. "What if I'm not strong enough?" he whispered. Claire smiled, and in that smile William saw Eleanor, his grandmother, and all the generations of guardians who had come before. "The gift has always been with you, Uncle William. The only question is, are you ready to accept it?" The first rays of the rising sun broke through the spiraling clouds forming above the ancient tree, creating a spectacle of light that left the entire town of Willow Creek in silence. William walked toward the clearing, followed by Claire and the representatives of the 7 ancient families. His steps were firm now, carrying the weight of a decision that was no longer a burden, but a conscious choice. "Each family must take its place," instructed Claire, pointing to 7 specific spots around the tree. The marks on the ground, once invisible, began to glow with different colors for each family. Albert, still processing all the revelations, took his place at the spot designated for the Johnsons. His eyes, once filled with bitterness, now showed a newfound understanding. "Knowledge without wisdom is like a weapon without direction," he said, repeating words his grandfather used to say, which only now made complete sense. One by one, the representatives of the other families took their positions. The Smiths, with their connection to nature. The Olivers, guardians of truth. The Perrys, masters of healing through music. The Rockwells, protectors of traditions. And the Coasts, interpreters of dreams. "Now, Uncle William," called Claire, her voice echoing in a way that didn't seem entirely natural. "You must take your place as the chief guardian of the Thompsons." William stepped forward, positioning himself at the last point of the circle. The moment his feet touched the glowing mark, a wave of energy surged through his body. Suddenly he could see everything with extraordinary clarity, the golden threads of energy connecting all the families, the secrets hidden in the deep roots of the tree, the stories of love, loss, and redemption that had shaped Willow Creek over the centuries. "The portal is ready," announced Claire, who now glowed with a light of her own. "But before it opens, each family must renew their commitment to the original pact, not out of obligation, but by choice." One by one, the representatives of the families began to speak, their voices filled with emotion and power. "The Johnsons renew their commitment to guard the true memory, using knowledge to unite, not to divide," declared Albert. "The Smiths pledge to maintain harmony with nature, remembering that we are part of something greater than ourselves," said the family matriarch. The declarations continued, each one resonating with a deep truth that made the tree pulse more strongly. When it was his turn, William felt the words flow naturally, as if the tree itself whispered them into his heart. "The Thompsons renew their commitment to protect the balance among all gifts, recognizing that true power lies in the union of our differences." The moment the last word was spoken, the light around the tree intensified. The trunk began to glow from within, and an opening appeared at its base. Not a physical opening, but a portal of pure light. Claire approached the tree, free for the first time in 5 years. "It's time, Mum," she called softly. For a moment nothing happened. Then a figure began to emerge from the portal, first just an outline of light, then gradually taking solid form. Eleanor Thompson, exactly as William remembered her, only a few years older, stepped through the passage. "William," she smiled, tears glistening in her eyes, "you finally understood." The brothers embraced, decades of distance and misunderstandings dissolving in that moment. William could feel the power of the gift flowing between them, healing old wounds, restoring long-broken bonds. "I'm sorry," he whispered, "for not listening, for running away." "Shh," Eleanor gently interrupted him. "You had to follow your own path to get here. Some lessons can only be learned through our own choices." Claire joined the embrace, and for a moment, time seemed to stand still. The tree pulsed with a soft light, like a heart beating in sync with theirs. "And now?" someone from the watching crowd asked. Eleanor turned to the gathered families, her face radiant with a wisdom both ancient and new. "Now we begin again. Not as separate families, each guarding their secrets and gifts, but as one community using our talents for the good of all." William felt one last vibration on his phone. Probably his business empire crumbling in Chicago, but for the first time in his life, it didn't matter. He had found something far more valuable: his true heritage, his family, his place in the world. The sunlight now fully bathed the clearing, and the marks on the tree formed a new pattern, no longer a symbol of secrets and separation, but an emblem of unity and renewal. "The cycle is complete," declared Claire, her voice blending with the wind that gently blew through the branches of the ancient tree. "But our story is just beginning." And so, on that historic morning in Willow Creek, a new chapter began. The tree would remain there, no longer a prison of secrets, but as a living symbol of how love, truth, and the courage to choose the right path can transform not just one person, but entire generations. William Thompson, the man who once built walls around his heart, would now help build bridges between people. Her true legacy would not be measured in money or power, but in the lives she would help transform, the stories she would help preserve, and the love she finally learned to accept and share.